Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my brand new Netflix movie review, and today we're discussing part 2 of the Fear Street Trilogy, and we're talking part 2, 1978, which I'm really excited to share my thoughts with you all and let you know if it's worth checking out over this weekend in this spoiler-free review. Before we break it all down, if you could do me a favor and check me out on all my other social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed my review of Fear Street Part 2, 1978, well, make sure to give the video a thumbs up and also share the video. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in the comments, once you've seen Part 2, what'd you think about it? Did you enjoy the kills and the Friday the 13th homages, the characters, the story, the truths that we learn, and all the different backstories that we get from the characters that we met in Part 1? And then since we have Part 2 and Part 1 available, which is your favorite out of the two, and are you excited for the final chapter 1666 coming out next week? Let's discuss in the comments below. So if you guys haven't, go check out my first review that I did last week for Part 1. I had nothing but great things to say about it. It was fun. It reminded me so much of Wes Craven's Scream. It wasn't a carbon copy, but it was just paying homage and had some fun things to do and some really cool kills. So to say I was excited for Part 2 is definitely an understatement. I was beyond excited because especially this paying homage to a particular character that I'm a big fan of, and that's Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th. So did it live up to the hype? Well, let's start off with my positives. Starting off with a director who I am just beyond impressed with. Leigh is such a fantastic horror slasher director. I mentioned it last week. She is a student of the game. She studied Wes Craven. She's studying these Friday the 13th, Halloween type of homages. And she's not, like I said, she's not carbon copying the tropes and carbon copying the stories. She's paying homage to those stories. And I think she did a fantastic job of embracing that camp-like horror slasher vibes in this film. Now, we'll get to some now. I'm not saying she's a perfect horror director, but she does have some things she has to redefine and kind of, there's rough around the edges when it comes to her story beats. But focusing on the things she does well in this film, the body count, the tension, the soundtrack, the way she paced the film and kind of selects her shots. I think she's a great director for horror and slasher. And hey, big studios out there, if you're looking for someone to reintroduce Jason Voorhees or Friday the 13th to a newer generation, or hell, create a new slasher for a new generation, I think she can get the keys to that car. And if she wants to do other genres, comedy, romance, whatever the case may be, I'm sure she can do all that. But if she wants to stay in the horror lane and, be up there with the James Wan and the Jennifer Kents and the, Jordan Peeles, I think she has that type of sensibility. Ari Aster and all that stuff. She's a really great horror director. I think she is the MVP of this film because she does a really good job in the direction. But speaking of direction, let's talk a little bit about the film. Now, as a story goes, it's nothing new, and we'll talk about that in my criticisms, but as regards to being a fan of Friday the 13th and the homages, and, we got the camps and the kids and the counselors, and the one thing I love about this film, the body count. Now, I enjoy Part 1, as, like I say, check out my review, but the body count in this film triples the body count in Part 1. I am talking about kills, the intensity, the brutality, the velocity of the kills. Again, Jason Voorhees very much in this film, and a particular character that was my favorite character in the entire film. I won't reveal who the character is, but I'm rocking my flannel lumberjack shirt for that character because the man with the axe and the bag over his head, he doesn't play games. He doesn't care if you're a man, a woman, a child. You're going to get that axe, and you're going to see the other side of the axe. I thought that character was fantastic, and the brutality of those axes going across people's faces and chests and heads getting cut off. That character was absolutely incredible. I don't know if it has an actual name. Obviously, the character has a name, but I don't know what they call the character in the Fear Street lore, but I was such a fan of that character because, again, the body count was pretty high. So I love the kills in this film. It paces, like I said, there is still a good sense of fun within this particular movie. The soundtrack is great, playing into the 70s. The costuming, the set designs, all that stuff is really good. And then I have to also point out the lore. I am a sucker for connective tissues, and this film definitely lets us know who Nick was. We met Nick in Part 1 as a sheriff, and we meet him as a kid. We learn a little bit about about our main character Ziggy and how she plays into the first part, as well as just other little characters that we've met or heard of in the first one, and we get to see them as kids. So I like how it's tying things together, how it ties to the witch, how it ties into 1666. So I love this lore and this story and how it's connecting all the pieces. So I really enjoy that aspect. So let's go into my criticism here. I mentioned that the film is definitely fun. Love the body count, the direction, the main killer is really awesome, but let's call it what it is. I did not really care too much for our main characters, and that is Ziggy, played by Sadie Sink, who we all know as Max from Stranger Things. She's our main character. She really didn't do much for me in this film. She was just exposition about her and her bad relationship with her sister, Cindy, who we'll talk about here in a second. I just wasn't a fan of Ziggy. She just was very dull, very traditional in a sense of just a rebel without a cause and just causing nonsense. I just wasn't a fan of Ziggy. And the relationship between her and her sister, which is kind of the heart of the film, this sistership, these two sisters who once had a really good relationship and they kind of fell out, and there's a good sister and there's a bad sister, and the good sister doesn't want to acknowledge her past and her history with her father and her younger sister in this film. So I just didn't really feel that sistership in this movie. There is a moment where I'm just like, oh, okay, that is a nice thing for a sister to do, but I just didn't feel that the buildup led to the payoff that we get with those two sisters. And that brings me to Cindy, who is pretty much, if I'm not gonna lie, I think she's the main character of this movie. And for the first half of this film, Cindy was not working for me. The whole first half in general was just very kind of bland and very generic. It does, again, it plays into the camp and the counselors and the sex and the drugs and the drinking and all that stuff. But then I would say it took about 40 minutes for the film to really pick up for me. But in particularly following Cindy's story, it wasn't necessarily actress, but it was who they surrounded Cindy with. And this character, to me, her name was Alice. Man, Alice was in the film way too much for me because she was the worst character in the movie for me. It was the acting, it was the character, it was just the stuff the character said and the stuff that the character was involved with. I just wasn't a fan of Alice, and she really kind of brought down the Cindy character for me because they were mostly in the movie together a lot. So I would have to say I personally enjoyed the characters more in part one, and the characters in part two, I just didn't connect. I didn't connect to their story. I didn't connect to the believability of the sisters. And also, I just have to say it, and this isn't a spoiler, but there gets to a point where there are characters from part one learning the past and learning what happened, how this all began. And there's a moment where our characters don't realize who Ziggy is in the film. And I'm just like, wait, isn't that pretty obvious? I don't want to spoil anything, but once you see the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the film just didn't really, it took a while to pick up. Like the first one, I was in it from the opening scene, right? Paying homage to Scream. But this one, it took, like I said, about 40 minutes to stuff to really hit the fan. And when it hits the fan, it's entertaining, it's brutal, it's gruesome, but it takes a while. And then even within those moments, it just wasn't as cohesive and it wasn't as enticing and compelling as the first one for me personally. So those are my pros, those are my cons. Before I give you all my overall thoughts and give you my overall score of this film, make sure if you haven't already to like, share, comment below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So overall, Fear Street Part 2, 1978, it's fun, has a great soundtrack. I enjoyed the direction once again by Leigh. She is fantastic. The killer is really cool, and there are some moments that I enjoy within the movie, but overall, those characters to me were just kind of very traditional, very formulaic, play too much into the tropes. Like I like when a film can play within its genre and not acknowledge the zangy and the craziness and the kookiness of what's going on. But I wasn't sold by the characters. There was really, besides the main killer and besides, seeing some of the characters from the first one come into it, I wasn't as attached to the story as I was in the first one. But with all that being said, I still had a good time with the film. So I'm going to give 1978 a solid 3 out of 5. It's a fun slasher film, and I would recommend you all check it out. Still, for me personally, part 1 is a lot better in my opinion. It's just more refined, but I'm still excited to see how the origins of the witch came to be in 1666. So I'm looking forward to this trilogy, and I'm excited that we only have to wait a week to see it. So that's my thoughts on 1978. Let me know what you all like, what you didn't like. What did you think about the killer? What did you think about that silly reveal of who Ziggy really was? And are you excited for 1666? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you stuck around to this video, I appreciate you all. Again, make sure to like, share, comment below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe. We'll see you on the next video.